They had stopped sending signals. The SEAL team was trapped between the cliffs of Black Canyon. No reinforcements, no escape route, not a single UAV in the sky. Not because of any ban, but because no one dared to fly into the place that had nearly swallowed the entire squad last time. The same mountain crevice, the same trap. But this time there was no plan B. No safety waiting behind. Only silence. Until the ground trembled with a deep, harsh sound, slicing rapidly across the mountain slopes. It was not the sound of rescue. It was a roar of vengeance, tearing through the void like thunder across a shredded sky. A seal whispered, as if afraid his own voice would shatter the impossible. "No, she's back." And all the survivors looked up, because they knew, every time that roar echoed, a legend stepped out of the shadows. The rumors about her never disappeared. They weren't recorded in military reports, nor did they appear on any official files. They lived in the neon-lit bars, in grocery stores smelling of weak coffee, and in the knowing nods exchanged among veterans who were far more accustomed to other people's failures than to examining their own. Her name was Sarah Miller. In Buena Vista, Colorado, that name once stood for pride. The only A-10 pilot in the squadron, someone who flew so close that her wheels nearly brushed the treetops. But one day, it became a warning sign. The press labeled her the disgrace of the Air Force. Over time, the story became legend in that small community. A dive gone wrong, a half-second delayed signal, and nearly the entire squadron wiped out over the skies of Afghanistan. She was grounded. No hearings, no defenses. Just a single order folded neatly into a white envelope. Now, every morning, Sarah drove a faded green delivery truck, dropping off supplies at the local supermarket. No uniform, no medals. Only a worn baseball cap bearing a faded A-10 logo remained. The hat reminded people of her, and then they immediately looked away. The community still honored veterans, erecting memorials in the Central Park, flying flags on porches. But for Sarah, they offered the gaze of an outsider. In bars, sometimes someone would half-jokingly say, "The pilot who almost sent the whole squadron to the hereafter." A hoarse laugh would echo briefly, then vanish as she walked past. Sarah didn't argue, didn't justify herself. At night, neighbors heard the whirring from the garage. Not the television, not the radio. It was the plastic propeller of a remote-controlled model plane. A child's toy, people thought. But for Sarah, it was the only way her hands could remember the feel of flying. In the darkness, her eyes tracked the tiny model looping in circles, as if trying to hold on to something lost forever. She lived like a shadow. Only one detail betrayed that silence: the faded tattoo on her right arm, the words, "No one left behind," embracing the A-10 insignia. A vow never retracted, even though everyone else had withdrawn their faith in her. The paradox was this: the townspeople believed in loyalty, believed in sacrifice, yet they so easily forgot a pilot who once flew to save them. Sarah became living proof of a truth nobody wanted to admit. Sometimes society doesn't want the truth, it just wants a name to blame. The small town continued its daily rhythms. People still strolled along the Arkansas River, still photographed the snow-capped mountains in the distance. But in a dark corner on the town's edge, one woman waited quietly. Not for forgiveness, but for the single moment that would prove all those whispers wrong. The question is, when that moment comes, will anyone still dare to face the truth head-on? People often say, if a secret is important enough, it will find a way to reveal itself. For Sarah, that happened on a seemingly meaningless morning. The small delivery truck rocked along the dusty road leading to the repair shop, where the smell of oil and burning metal lingered in the air. Sarah was all too familiar with this rhythm, delivering a few boxes of parts, signing a couple of papers, giving a quick nod, and disappearing before anyone could stare too long. The town had framed her into the role of a delivery woman. She had let that frame confine her until the thread on her old jacket pocket tore. A small piece of metal fell onto the concrete floor, producing a dry, sharp clink that sounded unusually loud among the machinery. Sarah bent down to pick it up, but another hand was faster. It was a young soldier, his face still carrying the innocence of 20 years, wearing an oil-stained t-shirt, eyes shining as if he had just seen a treasure. In his hand was a worn challenge coin, engraved with the emblem of the 303rd Fighter Squadron, the Hog Drivers. That symbol was unmistakable, the A-10 Warthog, wings like blades, representing a spirit fearless and unyielding. The young soldier's eyes lit up with excitement. To him, it wasn't a chipped coin, it was proof of a legend. Sarah froze for a moment. Part of her wanted to smile faintly at his naivete. Another part felt her heart tremble. She snatched the coin back. The motion was quick and decisive, like an old reflex that hadn't faded. The coin disappeared into her pocket, leaving a brief silence between them. But the soldier had already seen it. Not just the symbol, but her trembling hand holding it, trembling not from fear, but from memories rushing back. The shell Sarah had built over many years, a silent woman, just a shadow of her past cracked in that instant. Since being grounded, Sarah had lived by small routines. She controlled them as meticulously as a pilot checks the cockpit before takeoff. At exactly 5 a.m., black coffee. At 6 a.m., start the truck. At 9 p.m., a small model airplane looping above the empty lot behind the garage. Not a single beat could falter, because any gap, no matter how small, would unleash the flood of memories. Yet that young soldier had just created such a gap. In his eyes, Sarah glimpsed what she had lost. Absolute faith that flying meant freedom, meant power, meant never leaving a teammate behind. And painfully, she had once embodied that faith. News of the 303rd had spread across the base. The Hog Drivers flew so low that soldiers on the ground could see the pilot's eyes in the cockpit. They were respected for one reason: never abandoning anyone on the battlefield. Even when flying over valleys where radars were blind, where a cheap RPG could turn a warthog into a pile of scrap, Sarah had carried that belief on her back. A belief so big it became a burden. One dive gone wrong, a single second's delay in formation, and reverence turned into condemnation. She had lived with that condemnation for years, burying it in silence. But that coin, seemingly just a piece of worn metal, tore that silence apart. Ironically, while the town saw her as a failure, that young soldier saw something in her she had forgotten. Proof that legends aren't made by chance. They're forged with sweat, blood, and scars no one wants to mention. And in that moment, Sarah realized something. Some memories never truly vanish. They lie in wait, like the faded warthog sitting under the eaves of some base, gathering dust but far from dead. That night, back home, Sarah spent hours staring at the coin. Her rough fingers traced its scratched surface as if trying to touch the cockpit she once knew. Under the pale yellow light, her face revealed a thin smile, half bitter, half proud, a smile the town had long forgotten. She knew her shell had just cracked, and once a crack appears, what's hidden inside will find a way to escape. When everything is exposed, will she fall again, or will this be the moment she soars back? Can you guess what happens next? Relax for a moment, comment, 1, or I'm still here, to keep following along. Accidents never knock before they enter. They usually arrive unexpectedly, as if choosing the exact moment when someone lets their guard down. A week after the brush with her past, fate came for Sarah, though she had no idea. In western Colorado, the joint exercise between the SEALs and the Air Force was supposed to be a familiar scenario. A transport helicopter, carrying elite soldiers, simulating an ambush, then finding a way to retreat. A war game, nothing more. But that game twisted within a few short seconds. The simulated air defense system, which was only supposed to fire lasers to mark targets, suddenly malfunctioned. A real warhead launched, tearing through the air. It didn't need long to find the hovering helicopter trapped in the Black Canyon Gorge. A crisp explosion echoed, like a full stop marking the end. The helicopter shuddered violently, black smoke erupting like a flag of death. The pilot struggled to maintain control, finally forced into an emergency landing on the jagged rock below. Inside, the SEAL team tumbled like puppets jerked by violent strings, bones colliding with steel, blood spreading across the floor. No one died instantly, but with each passing minute, their chance of survival narrowed. They sent distress signals. The radio waves slammed into the sheer canyon walls, then faded. Only a few weak fragments escaped, drifting through the chaotic air layers. In the command room at Peterson Air Force Base, officers strained at the blinking screens, interrupted signals like whispers from ghosts. A young commander sighed, his voice heavy. No aircraft can get into that gorge. No one. It wasn't just a technical truth, it was a verdict. Black Canyon was notorious for its treacherous terrain, vertical cliffs like razor blades, unpredictable whirlwinds, and a space so narrow that even the most seasoned pilots called it the Stone Tomb. Satellites couldn't penetrate, radars were useless. Entering meant signing your own obituary. In the silence, a raspy voice broke through. An older officer, decades of flying etched into his eyes, cloudy yet still sharp with the cold clarity of one who had witnessed too many accidents. He looked at no one, just muttered, "There was someone who once did it." The room held its breath. Young officers turned to listen. The old man slowly lifted his head. His voice wasn't loud, but every word landed like stone. Sarah Collins. That name had long vanished from official records, existing only as a shadow in stories told at the base bar. A pilot who had once flown a battered A-10 Warthog through terrain everyone deemed impossible. A pilot who had pulled 12 SEALs from the jaws of death, and the only pilot ever grounded after surviving because the price of audacity was a casualty list the higher-ups never wanted mentioned. In the minds of those who had witnessed it, Sarah was an uncomfortable secret, both a source of pride and a shameful wound. People didn't know whether to remember her as a hero or as a reckless risk-bringer. But now, with the SEAL team trapped at the bottom of Black Canyon, no one cared about labels. They knew only one thing: there was no other choice. Ironically, at the very moment her name was spoken, Sarah was on her routine delivery run. She even thought today was quieter than usual. Empty streets, coffee not too bitter, and the old playlist in her truck repeating a song she had heard thousands of times. Had she known that, at the same time a room full of officers was silently debating whether to call her name, she might have laughed a laugh both sarcastic and bitter. They needed her only when everything had fallen into chaos. But fate never asks permission. It knocks, and usually with a fist. Debate erupted in the command room. Some objected strongly. Sarah was grounded, not authorized. Others smirked, saying invoking her name was like clinging to an old legend. Yet amid the objections, the real question emerged. If not her, then who? Maps spread across the table, flight paths drawn and immediately crossed out. Every option led to dead ends. Only one memory remained, a memory of a woman who had done the impossible on a night of smoke and fire. The base colonel, known for his cold demeanor, finally closed the file. He spoke little, but his eyes delivered the decision: find her. And so, after years of silence, the sky called out for Sarah Collins once more. She had no idea, but fate had begun to move, like the blades of a plane slowly starting before roaring to full power. Some news drifts past ears and disappears like the wind. But there are other pieces of news which, once they reach the right person, turn into an irresistible call. For Sarah, it wasn't a cold administrative notice from the base, but a scattered fragment of information, spreading through the town like fire over dry grass. A SEAL team was trapped in Black Canyon, and no pilot dared to fly in for a rescue. Others heard it and shook their heads, calling it a distant tragedy. Sarah silently left the table, drove straight to the abandoned hangar on the outskirts. There, under a thick layer of dust, like a blanket of time, lay a steel beast that once roared across the skies of Afghanistan. A-10, serial number 81-0973. No one thought it still worked. Some even joked it was only good for scrap metal. But Sarah knew better than anyone. This beast was not easy to kill. She walked slowly along the fuselage, fingers tracing the cold metal, where scratches and dents spread like scars. Amid them, a small etched mark remained, a line left by her former squad mates. For those on the ground, to outsiders it was just a motto. To Sarah, it was a guiding principle, the only reason she had ever risked everything. Because on the ground, the soldiers waiting were not numbers on a report, they were flesh and blood teammates. She stood there for a long while, as if listening to the past whisper through the dust. Eyes that had once hardened to smoke and fire now shone, both resilient and fragile. Perhaps after all, she had never truly left the sky. She had merely buried her wings under the weight of ordinary life, waiting for fate to knock again. Night fell, and the town was silent. People assumed Sarah had returned to her worn apartment with only bookshelves and a flickering night lamp. But before dawn, the radars at Peterson AFB began blinking. A signal took off from the direction of the abandoned hangar. Not a modern F-16, nor a transport helicopter. Instead, on the screen appeared a name many technicians thought had been erased from the system: A-10 Thunderbolt II, serial 81-0973. The news spread like lightning through the command room. Chairs clattered, footsteps echoed. Officers rushed to the screens, unable to believe their eyes. Someone exclaimed, "Oh my God, it can still fly?" Then the commanding voice thundered, "Who authorized takeoff?" The answer came over the radio, hoarse, brief, impossible to interrupt. "Don't ask, they need me." No authentication code, no rigid protocol, just a familiar voice, carrying the weight of memory. In that moment, no officer doubted who was on the line. In the misty sky, the old A-10 screeched like a steel beast waking from a long slumber. The TF-34 engines roared, trailing thick gray smoke, yet still powerful enough to shake the window panes of nearby houses. Sarah sat in the cramped cockpit, everything at once alien and familiar. The old control panel, a few loose switches, dim screens, yet her hands moved instinctively. No thought required. Her body had been trained for this moment years ago. A moment of humor, if one could call it that, came as Sarah had to slam the electronic panel 3 times before the HUD screen lit. "Good thing I still know how to calm your stubborn self," she muttered, almost smiling. The aircraft seemed to respond with a deep, resonant scream. Back at the base, many officers were still arguing. Some demanded the A-10 return immediately. Others insisted the pilot had violated military orders. But amid the noise, one truth was undeniable. Out there, a SEAL team was still trapped. Time was not on their side, and only one aircraft was heading toward Black Canyon. Sarah knew the price she might pay. Failure would mean disappearing forever, not just from the sky, but from collective memory. But if she succeeded, perhaps for the first time in years, she could stand tall without feeling the past crush her shoulders. The steel beast shook violently as it raced toward the horizon, and somewhere in the old cockpit, Sarah whispered words no one could hear. "This time I will not leave them behind." Dear viewers, stay tuned for the next part. It's going to leave you in awe. take a moment to leave a comment below and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. It's always thrilling to see people joining us from all over the world. In the dense darkness of Black Canyon, no sound remained except for labored breathing and bullets ricocheting off the cliff walls. The SEAL team clung to the tiniest crevices on the mountainside, evading fire from malfunctioning simulated anti-aircraft guns while trying to keep their radios alive amid the weak signals. They were accustomed to no one arriving in time, accustomed to the cold finality of a lost connection. But accustomed did not mean ready to face the outcome. Then, suddenly, a deep roar echoed through the canyon. Unlike the familiar sounds of helicopters or modern fighters, it was a metallic, wild sound, the 30mm GAU-8 Avenger gun firing. Bullets rained down like shooting stars, tearing the ground apart, shredding the mock artillery emplacements into chaotic flames. The canyon walls reflected the roar, making it reverberate like endless thunder, shaking the hearts of those who heard it. The SEALs looked up. In the brief moment when fire and dust erupted, they saw the silvered, chipped paint of an A-10 streaking through the canyon. Its wings almost scraped the cliffs, sending small shards of rock hitting the ailerons and leaving bright white scratches. Yet the beast did not falter. It banked sharply, tilted, then roared again, firing as if ripping the entire sky apart. One SEAL gripped the radio, voice choking, almost crying. Amid the chaotic noise, a few words rang out clearly. She's really here. Ironheart is back." In the cramped cockpit, Sarah gripped the controls. Sweat seeped into her gloves, the HUD flickered on and off, but her eyes did not waver. She knew this aircraft was no longer perfect, knew every violent shake could be the last. But if she had to choose between falling and abandoning her teammates, she hesitated not a second. The A-10 was never built to be beautiful, but to endure. And in Sarah's hands, it did more than endure. It came alive. Tight loops, dives, skimming the rock that many modern pilots would never dare, all became familiar rhythms. For a rare moment, Sarah almost laughed. When the plane shook violently after taking a hit, the pressure gauges spinning wildly, she muttered under her breath, "Don't sulk on me right now, old friend." And as if in reply, the engine roared louder than before, pushing the A-10 out of the hail of bullets. A strange, darkly humorous moment, but sometimes only those who have stared death in the face could understand it. On the ground, one simulated artillery emplacement after another was obliterated. Sarah wasn't aiming for perfection in each burst. She was aiming for one thing only, opening a corridor of life for the incoming rescue helicopter. Each exploding emplacement illuminated the air enough for the SEALs to know they were not being abandoned. But Black Canyon did not surrender easily. Another series of rounds hit the left wing, shaking the A-10 violently, spewing thick black smoke. Radar signals at Peterson AFB flickered chaotically. Many officers panicked, thinking the beast was about to fall. But in that canyon, Sarah had no right to let it crash. She yanked the stick hard, using her own battered fuselage to shield the helicopter daringly advancing into the canyon. The armor steel designed to protect the pilot now became a shield for an entire team on the ground. Once, twice, and on the third hit, the A-10 took more damage. Yet it still flew. How it did so remained a mystery. To the soldiers below, it was no longer metal and ammunition but a steel spirit, refusing to retreat until everyone was safe. Finally, the rescue helicopter touched down, wheels hitting the ground sharply. The battered but alive SEALs scrambled aboard. Above, the A-10 still patrolled, like a loyal hunting dog, ready to swallow any remaining danger. Only when the helicopter lifted off, leaving the canyon, did Sarah ease the controls slightly. Yet even then, the roar of the A-10's engines echoed like a warning to Black Canyon, "Don't touch them while I'm still here." Smoke trailed behind the plane, blending with the Colorado sky. To outsiders, it was the sign of a machine in its death throes, but to those who witnessed it that day, it was the mark of a legend rewritten. Sarah and the steel beast had carved a bloody path through Black Canyon, but how long could a smoking, battered A-10 continue to fly before fate came to collect its debt? The moment the helicopter blades touched the safe sky, the radio suddenly went silent. No guidance, no pounding heartbeat of the female pilot's voice. Only the wind howling through the canyon and the fading echo of the A-10's engines like a soul departing from a tragic stage. The SEALs looked at one another inside the helicopter. Each knew that someone had chosen to stay behind just to make sure they could go on. That night, Peterson Base descended into chaos. Officers scanned for emergency signals. Radars swept across the mountain ranges, but there was no trace of 81-0973. Young soldiers in the operations room tried to reassure one another that she would return. Yet as dawn broke over the horizon, the cold truth remained. Sarah had vanished, along with that silver beast. But what was lost was more than a pilot and an aircraft. What remained was a story, and that story wasted no time finding its way into the hearts of all America. The next day, newspapers from Colorado to New York reported an unnamed A-10 pilot had risked her life to save an entire SEAL team in Black Canyon. From the forgotten archives, the image of the A-10 Thunderbolt II suddenly appeared everywhere on television, front pages, and in every conversation at roadside diners. It was called The Miracle in the Canyon. Within hours, America seemed to reclaim a lost memory. Articles didn't just recount the battle, they traced the past of a woman once cast aside for an old mistake. Sarah, a name once paired with failure, was now etched as Ironheart. No longer a symbol of defeat, but proof of an eternal vow for those on the ground. On veteran forums, those who had served with the A-10 years ago returned, sharing tales of old planes saving them in distant valleys, dusty deserts. They said the A-10 never abandoned the troops on the ground, and now all of America had seen once again that legends need not be polished, only loyal. In Buena Vista, a small cafe, usually crowded only on weekend mornings, a server watched in surprise as an elderly man placed an object on the counter. A worn military coin, etched with the insignia of a long-defunct unit. The veteran pushed it toward the young woman, whispering as if someone might overhear, "Return this to her, and tell her America owes her a bow." No one saw him leave. Only the heavy coin remained, cold as steel, yet carrying the weight of a nation reclaiming a piece of collective memory. In the following days, the story of Sarah did not stop at the newspaper. It became a topic in military classrooms, family dinners, even late-night talk shows, where a host jokingly called the A-10 the cranky grandmother of the Air Force, old, temperamental, yet not to be underestimated. Audiences laughed, then fell silent, remembering that someone had truly flown that ancient beast to become a living shield. And somewhere, amid the chatter, a question still lingered. Was Sarah alive, or had she remained in Black Canyon? A nation had looked at Sarah with new eyes. But would Sarah herself ever see that day, or would her name exist only in the stories retold? Thank you for joining us. Perhaps, like me, you sometimes wonder, do those who fight silently for others ever get recognized? Yet the most beautiful thing is, they don't need recognition. They don't need to be seen to shine. They only need a reason to keep going. Don't forget to let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. It's always amazing to see someone joining us from around the world. Comment 1 if you enjoyed this story, so we can continue bringing you more incredible tales.
They bound his hands, pressed him onto the deck as if he were a threat. But they did not notice the faded tattoo on his left shoulder. They did not know that just 1 hour later, 8 Navy warships would materialize from the mist, encircle those waters, and salute him in silence. No one knew his name. They only saw an 81-year-old man steering a ramshackle boat into forbidden seas. He did not resist. He did not explain. On the deck lay a wooden box, sealed for half a century. When the Navy's iron sails all came to a standstill, when the order to cease fire rang out, only a single question reverberated across the waves. Who is this man? And what in that tattoo compelled an entire fleet to bow? All right, dear viewers, prepare for a tale that will leave you speechless. Take a moment to like the video and subscribe, only if you truly feel the story I'm sharing. And drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always exciting to see you tuning in from every corner of the globe. Raymond Miller was 81 years old, yet to the townspeople of Sitka, he seemed like an unnameable fragment of their collective memory. Not because he spoke often or appeared frequently. On the contrary, he was so silent that he was almost invisible in daily life. But there was something about him that no one could forget, as if his absence for even a single day would leave an unfillable void in their monotonous rhythm. Each dawn, people saw him walking in silence, his pace unhurried yet steady, head slightly bowed, gaze never meeting theirs. Some had tried to greet him, only to give up when no reply came, not from rudeness, but because he did not belong. Raymond lived in a wooden cabin at town's edge. No visitors came, no family called, no radio or TV sounds drifted through his windows. Passers-by spoke of an indescribable stillness, as if the house cradled something too ancient to name. The nickname, Ghost Captain, began with one youngster and spread. At first a joke, then a habit, and finally a wary term of endearment. The elders said he'd been a naval officer. Some claimed he lost wife, child, shipmates in a sinking. No one knew if it were true, and no one dared ask. All tales about him were others' inventions, and he never confirmed or denied a word. Each year, on a single day, Raymond set to sea. Not earlier, not later, never varying. The date remained unknown until he appeared at the dock, donning a frayed coat, a wool cap, and worn canvas gloves. He boarded his boat slowly, yet resolutely, an act he'd performed dozens of times, and would until he could no longer. His vessel, named Seabound, was neither large nor beautiful, and certainly unfit for modern safety standards, but it floated, it sailed, and it was his sole trust. The hull was patched with dozens of mismatched planks, each board hand-cut, sanded, nailed, and painted by his time-worn hands, each nail a memory, each scar a story untold. People once mocked him, an old man fiddling with scraps of wood, nothing like a proper restoration, but over the years that laughter faded, replaced by silence when they saw him ascend the deck, hand resting on the helm as if greeting a kindred soul. No one asked where he went. They only knew he would return before sunset, not a minute late. During those hours, Seabound vanished into the ocean. No satellite image, no tracking, no one could follow him. Yet somehow, Raymond always came back, alone, silent, eyes unchanged, demeanor undisturbed, yet they sensed that he was not the same. Something in him had been stirred, then stowed away, folded tight within, too guarded to reveal. For the townspeople it became a ritual. On that fateful day, though unspoken, all eyes drifted to the sea more often. Some lingered longer at the harbor cafe, others stood at the pier's end, pretending to wait for someone. But they shared one thought. Raymond was at sea again. And in that silence, respect was granted, needing neither thanks nor farewell. When he returned, everything resumed. No one asked, and he told nothing. But his presence after each voyage affirmed that something lay beyond human comprehension, something only he could face. And though they did not know what it was, they accepted it as part of their town, like the sea, like the wind, like time itself. Raymond Miller never needed anyone to understand him, yet through that steady silence, he compelled them all to listen, not with words but with an unmistakable presence. In the narrow hold of Seabound, amid weathered timbers and the scent of aged engine oil, there lay one object placed as if it were the axis of all remaining motion. A dark wooden box, its weight greater than its modest appearance suggested. Raymond Miller secured it with 3 iron hasps, not out of fear of loss, but to guard something deeper, tied to the silence he'd borne for decades. Inside that wooden shell lay a secret, not treasure, nor easily named relic of war, but a part of himself, a fragment of a past he dared not relive, yet could never allow himself to forget. The box was lined with faded, oiled cloth, its folds hardened by time. To any casual observer, it might seem a simple keepsake. But to Raymond, it was an artifact. The vessel for a final word that had never been heard again. Whenever his hand rested on the lid, his gaze lingered long, not from hesitation, but because he listened. Attuned to a frequency of silence, emanating from memories too distant to name, too vivid to erase. Beneath his worn naval coat, upon his left shoulder, was a tattoo faded by the years. A phoenix spreading its wings skyward, its body entwined around a broken arrow. Beneath it, a blurred inscription, Orion Division 112. Few still recalled that name. Some in military circles might have heard it fleetingly, then dutifully forgotten, for the unit, its campaign, and every related file had been withdrawn, declassified, and expunged from all official records in late 1972. No explanation, no announcement. Simply vanishing. Yet that tattoo remained, etched into his flesh, melding with wrinkles and scars. Whenever the wind lifted his coat, the phoenix emerged as a reminder, no longer sharp, no longer prominent, but stubbornly present, just like him. No one ever asked about that tattoo, perhaps deterred by the look in Raymond's eyes if it was noticed, not cold nor angry, but like a silent whisper. Do not touch it. Do not summon it from its quiet. To him, Orion Division was more than a unit name. It was memory, voice, the faces grown dim, yet never gone. In his mind, each man remained, their bowed heads as orders were given, their silence in passing messages, their hands on shoulders before venturing into places with no return. And then the crackle of broken radio, those final fragmentary signals lost to the wind, unanswered. The box in Seabound's hold was more than a container. It was where he kept that unit's last word, a code sent in desperation, written by hand, safeguarded for 51 years, remembered by no one but him. No order required him to keep it. No authority forbade him to reveal it. But Raymond knew that if that box were opened at the wrong time, in the wrong way, or by the wrong person, all that his brothers had sacrificed to preserve would shatter into oblivion. He had once wanted to cast it into the sea. Some nights he sat alone, key in hand, box before him, and whispered, "Is this enough?" Yet his hand never rose, because the answer came before the question formed. Not yet. Still not. Others might think him haunted, claim he lived in the past, but Raymond did not live in memory. He lived with memory. He was the continuation his comrades could not complete. And until that final message was heard again, or laid to rest where it belonged, he was not permitted to let go. It was not a burden. It was a vow, one he accepted without signature, without witness, without drumbeat or banner. Only a tattoo on his shoulder, an unwavering gaze, and a box none must open. For some things, though faded, still live, and live in silence, like the ink on his skin, like the three-locked chest, like the name never spoken again. Orion Division 112. On October 11th at 6 in the morning, Raymond Miller brought Seabound to the exact coordinates, 56 DG 55N 135 DG33. W. As he had for more than half a century, the engine cut, and an immediate, weighty silence enveloped him. Not the still water calm, but the silence of 51 deployments, of countless solitary voyages, of memories sealed so long he could no longer tell where they began. Every motion followed by instinct. Drop anchor. Check the transmitter. Haul in the antenna line. Lift the weathered radio lid. His gaunt, calloused fingers moved as though guided by a ritual performed hundreds of times, not because he feared forgetting, but because he forbade himself to forget. The radio trembled as he powered it on. Its first sound was not the crash of waves, but the hiss of static, like the last breath of a soul still unascended. Raymond lifted the mic to his lips. He drew a slow breath. His voice, hoarse, heavy, nearly vanished into the void around him. 112? Orion. Mayday. Still waiting. He said no more, made no frequency sweep, waited for no reply. He knew none would come. As it had for 50 years, that code went out one way. An echo cast into emptiness for ears no longer there to hear, but he transmitted nonetheless, for the point was never to receive an answer, but to refuse surrender. When done, he switched it off, folded the whip antenna, locked the radio back in its box. He did not regard it as machinery, but as part of himself, a bone-grown ancient, yet still sturdy enough to bear a memory heavier than its years. Then he rose, each movement measured as if under unseen scrutiny. No one watched, no cameras, no witnesses, but he remained solemn, as though fulfilling a vow before faces long gone. Raymond took the wooden box and stepped out of the cabin. His hands shook with age, yet held the chest as though clutching his own heart. He placed it on deck, beside the helm, exactly where it had rested for 51 years. Uncovered, unguarded, offered as a gift. No one certified the act, yet he performed it each year, same day, same hour, same place. Not a mechanical gesture, but a fidelity forgotten by all else. The box lay motionless, but in Raymond's mind it breathed. The breaths of those who sent it forth, who died for it, and who now lived on in the silence he sustained. No eyes on him, no witnesses. Yet his presence in that moment was an unspoken oath. Some things need no confirmation from others to be sacred, and he understood this better than anyone. Raymond expected no resolution, hoped for no voice on the line. What he did today, as every year, was not to revive the past, but to preserve it intact. As a gatekeeper for a sealed chapter of history, he chose not to depart, not to shut the door, not to extinguish the flame, but simply to keep it alive with that small action, sending a signal unanswered, placing a box unopened, standing still while everyone else had long since gone. That was the rendezvous with no return, but Raymond always came back. For sometimes, the journey matters more than the destination. It's who keeps walking, even knowing no one awaits at the end. Dear viewers, take a moment to relax or grab a glass of water before we continue, because the story's twists aren't over yet. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always thrilling to see you tuning in from around the globe. Comment 1 if you're enjoying the story, so we can keep bringing you more great tales. A Coast Guard patrol boat suddenly cut across Seabound's path. Its unannounced arrival instantly ratcheted the tension. Deck lights blinked like scanning eyes. The hull edged closer to the weathered vessel. The air grew dense, every heartbeat aboard both ships pounding faster. Raymond stood motionless at the helm. He heard the thrust of the patrol boat, then the engine cut, an abrupt silence thick with hesitation. But he did not turn. Wind, waves, and decades of darkness had never made him flinch, nor would age-withered hands or lined face. A squad of officers leapt onto Seabound's deck. Startled by the old man's quiet, the senior tossed down a coil of rope. "You're under arrest for trespassing," he barked, voice rigid, void of empathy for the unfolding story. A rough pull sent Raymond sprawling on the narrow deck. He did not resist, thrash, or cry out. Both his actions and his silence conveyed that he understood exactly what he was doing, and why he would never answer. His naval coat slipped from his shoulder in the fall. The tattoo on his left shoulder caught the patrol boat's floodlights, the phoenix and its broken arrow, the blurred legend, Orion Division, 112. That moment of silence lasted just long enough for a young officer to see and pause. His eyes flickered with sudden recognition, but only for a second. The higher-up's shout quelled it. "Ignore it! This isn't our concern!" The order rang cold. No one loosened their grip. No one flinched. They moved by reflex, obeying the command. The men bound Raymond's wrists not to conceal the tattoo, but to erase the trace of an identity they could not grasp. They hauled him toward the central cabin. No questions, no apologies, not a shared glance for the old man being treated like a criminal. The distance between law enforcers and the man under law stretched until only the thudding of boots on the plastic deck remained. In that instant, the young officer's gaze swept Raymond once more. Surprise, fear, and perhaps regret tangled in that look, yet too late. The order stood, and the man left behind was nothing but an execution of protocol. Raymond remained silent. He offered no resistance, no verbal protest, no tears, only an unconscious nod, the gesture of someone who'd long known how to stand firm on the silence of pride. The Coast Guard pulled him upright, like lifting an inanimate object, his movements heavier than his years. His trembling hand rose to grip the rail, his back kept straight. Clearly, he had no intention of fighting back, even as they treated him a trespasser. It happened swiftly. The young officer's goggles reflected a flicker of doubt. No time to doff his cap. The superior, just steps away, did not avert his eyes from the tattoo, yet did nothing, did not stop his man, did not speak another word. The scene crackled with tension, an air where humanity had been left behind. But amid the machinery of orders and law, a faded tattoo, a relic of the past, was enough to ignite that young officer's eyes for a heartbeat, then snuff it out. The action continued. The patrol boat fell silent and departed, as if they'd completed their duty. One more old man bound on deck, one more battered boat held fast, one more secret concealed. Raymond, granted no response, stood still, mastering silence as he had been taught. He did not shout. He did not beg. He stood tall, wrists bound, gaze fixed on the void beyond the bow, a portrait not easily erased. An old sailor paused at the moment when the world's understanding was too small to grasp the truth he carried. It was the blind act of law's agents facing the inexplicable. Despite his silence, beyond their ken, fettered by rope, Raymond still stood unmoved, refusing to waver though no one truly looked at the man detained. Go on, he thought, not as defiance, but as a message to himself, a testament that though bound by orders, he remained unbowed, like the phoenix on his shoulder, awaiting rebirth, even with a broken arrow. Sometimes it takes only a single signal to awaken a colossal machine. When Raymond Miller stood bound on Seabound's deck, the ropes biting into his aged wrists as if to erase his very identity, none of the Coast Guard crew realized they had struck a blind spot in history, a forbidden zone uncharted on any map, a memory unrecorded in any file, and a vow untouchable by any but those who died for it. Just 14 minutes after the code, 1-12, Orion, Mayday, still waiting. Crackled from his weathered radio, the U.S. Navy's secret radar network flared to life. A rare code file, dubbed 112 Omega, buried deep in top-secret archives, resurfaced abruptly. Red warning lights pulsed in the underground command center at Kodiak. No consultation needed. No verification required. No questions asked. One rule encoded for decades dictated, if that signal activated, all must deploy. 8 warships, each bearing a special insignia, slipped their moorings in unison. Engines roared like the past refusing to lie dormant. Vessels without names, only designation numbers, as if they themselves were the moving orders. Each manned by specially selected sailors trained to execute what no one else was permitted to know. Time raced beyond expectation. 64 minutes after Raymond's arrest, the eastern horizon ignited, not with dawn, but with the gleam of steel, of engines, of those floating fortresses bearing the emblem of absolute silence. 8 sentries appeared at once. No warning sent, no call to drop anchor or radio hail, no explanation offered. They simply came, direct, uniform, encircling the tiny Seabound as though to guard an artifact not yet acknowledged. The Coast Guard recoiled. They did not comprehend what unfolded. No training manual imagined being blocked by the U.S. Navy itself. They froze. Some glanced to their superior for explanation, but he stood motionless, lips pressed tight, gaze wavering. A helicopter settled onto the command ship amidst the formation. From it emerged a man in navy blue, uniform devoid of rank, bearing only a strange emblem on his left breast. No one knew his name, but the certainty of his stride, each deliberate, unhurried step, compelled all to part before him as if by ancient instinct. He set foot on Seabound's deck. He looked at no one, asked nothing, simply halted before Raymond. His eyes met the tattoo on the old sailor's left shoulder, and then he straightened, solemn, raised his hand in salute. No word spoken, no title uttered, only that gesture. But within it lay an unwritten past, an acknowledgement requiring no proclamation. "Welcome back, Commander Miller," he said, voice low, not loud, yet each word carried to every ear aboard. Not one soul smiled, not one questioned. The Coast Guard stood statuesque. They did not understand, but they felt that what had just transpired surpassed any authority they had ever wielded. Some averted their gaze, others looked away entirely, as if to avoid witnessing something sacred they were not meant to comprehend. No one untied Raymond. Yet when the Navy officer's hand rested on his shoulder, every rope became superfluous. Raymond spoke not. He did not bow, nor did he break into a grin. He merely closed his eyes for a heartbeat, as if to return for a moment to where he belonged. No applause needed, no fanfare, no champion required. He had come home, and this time, they saw him at last. The true cost of a vow sometimes lies not in what it demanded at the outset, but in who has the steadfastness to keep it alive until the end, even when the whole world has forgotten it ever existed. Not every hero seeks a name in the records. After that day's events, the U.S. Navy sent an official letter offering the Medal of Honor to Raymond Miller. They wished to honor him as a loyal commander, guardian of a secret campaign never recorded in history books. He refused, not out of disdain for glory, but because he knew the spotlight could not illuminate faces that never returned. Instead of accepting the medal, he sent back a wooden box, the same box he had carried for more than half a lifetime. Inside lay the broadcast code he had transmitted, the combat log with handwritten commands from Orion's final days, and a small slip of paper, its handwriting shaky but clear, for those who never came home. No news outlet reported it, no grand ceremony was held. Everything was delivered to the Department of Defense under a special directive few could access. Yet from that year onward, on October 11th each year, 8 warships of the Northern Fleet quietly appeared, slipped into Sitka's waters, and formed a half-moon around the weathered wooden vessel named Seabound. No horns sounded, no signal flags flew, no warning was given, nor any orders. Only an old man standing alone at the helm, hands on the worn wheel as if touching a living relic. His gaze fixed not on the ships, but beyond the horizon, where he once sent his signal, once hoped for a reply, and now simply kept the memory from drifting away forever. Sitka's townsfolk, year after year, came to know that scene as a sacred ritual no one dared disrupt. No one asked questions, no one filmed it. They stood at a distance, hands pressed to chests, as one might silently bid farewell to a loved one never found. His shoulder tattoo had faded with time, the phoenix blurred, the broken arrow now little more than a pale line. Yet the respect shown to it, and to him, never waned. It deepened, for they understood true strength lies not in prominence, but in the ability to uphold one's oath amid silence and oblivion. Raymond never recounted the full story. He published no memoirs, granted no interviews. All he ever left were the actions repeated each year, 1 day, 1 coordinate, 1 man, and 8 warships. A curious young sailor once asked, "Why 8?" No one knew for sure, yet some said that was the final number of his team. 8 souls who were never named again. Or perhaps each ship now served as a floating tomb, forming a cemetery adrift in the sea. Raymond offered no explanation. Some things require no words, and some oaths are kept only through silence. One chapter had closed, but no one could say the story had ended. For sometimes, those who choose silence leave the greatest echo. If you ever glimpse an old man standing quietly at the wheel, surrounded by 8 nameless warships, remember, you are witnessing a page of history never rewritten, an oath without paperwork, without proclamation, without audience, surviving more than half a century by the steadfast heart of one man. Thank you for following this story to its end. If it touched your heart, please share it with your family and friends in the United States. Somewhere out there may be other Raymond Millers, silent, devoted, never asking for anything in return. We'd love to know, where are you watching from, and what time is it for you? If you'd like to hear more untold stories like this, don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share. Each follower lights a small beacon that lets us continue telling the stories that have yet to be told.